Speed dating for world leaders. One after another, the powers that be, from Washington to London, from Europe to the global south, they're all lining up to meet Chinese President Xi Jinping. The latest leader, Russian President Vladimir Putin, declaring with Xi a new multipolar world order. And last week, it was U.S. President Donald Trump praising Xi as a friend and a respected leader, not a word about China as America's #1 threat. There was also Narendra Modi, Prime Minister of India, the superpower of the global south. And Xi has also held court for numerous European geopolitical suitors, including, you see him right there, French President Macron and the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. Well, joining me now is Teresa Fallon. She is the founder and director of the Center for Russia, Europe, Asia Studies in Brussels. She is one of Europe's leading experts on China's foreign policy and its strategic ties with Russia. She has spent years analyzing exactly this kind of, we're going to call it high-stakes diplomatic choreography. Teresa, it's good to have you with us today. And let me start with what we started this segment with, speed dating for world leaders. When it comes to being the perfect partner, is she the one?
Everyone is talking about a new multipolar order, but it looks like as you pointed out, all the leaders are moving to Beijing for these important meetings. So it's a new era of Sino-centralism, is what I would argue. And we saw with the meeting with Trump and Xi, there was kind of an acceptance of a G2, which would mean a bipolar world. So at the same time that Xi is telling Putin they're going to sign a document about a multipolar world, the reality is that it's really a bipolar world, and that the U.S. under Trump has just allowed that. Under the previous Obama administration, when China wanted to be seen as a peer, they really pushed back on that and said, no, it's not a G2. So now we've seen this kind of quiet shift, and it's not quite clear, though. We saw Trump being very friendly, and Xi maintained his sense of composure and was not very warm, I would say. But the last thing that happened before the U.S. plane left was that everyone dumped their gifts, their little pins, badges, anything that was given to them. Not one thing from China had crossed the threshold onto the U.S. plane. So I think that probably spoke more volume than all the drama and the diplomatic dance.
Yeah, I was reading about that. They were all afraid to bring, for example, their burner cell phones that they brought with them. They just left there. I want to pick up on this term that you used, sinocentrism, which suggests that we're seeing a new level of attention on China, or China being at the center of the world. But let me just ask you a little bit more behind that. Whose world are we talking about here when we're talking about greater sinocentrism?
Well, this is how China likes to see the world. And this has really played into Xi Jinping's hands quite well. We know that Trump had to postpone his meeting. So it was postponed because of the war in Iran. He might have been better off to have postponed it until something was cleared up with the war in Iran. Nevertheless, he kind of went to Xi, maybe asking for help and with the Iran war, and that really didn't come to pass. So Xi is, especially for his domestic audience, looks like, my gosh, the U.S. president comes here, he lowers his head in front of me, all these other leaders are coming to me. So this plays really well for the domestic audience in China because they have difficult economic headwinds right now. China has a lot of issues. Although he seems like a bigger player on the world stage, they have a lot of economic issues. And the problems with Iran and oil is also going to be affecting the Chinese economy as well. But at this point, it's kind of really hurting the U.S. more than it is hurting China. So I would suggest that one of the things that really chipped away at the U.S. position under Trump was that in the meetings, it was suggested that arms sales to Taiwan were a bargaining chip, and no other U.S. president has done that. So by doing that, he's kind of chipping away, Donald Trump is pushing or chipping away at the agreements that have been in place, and the status quo on the Taiwan Strait is really a problem now. He's sending mixed signals, and all the U.S. allies in the region are watching quite carefully. What will this mean for them? Will they have to hedge towards China? Will hedging eventually turn into appeasement, it remains to be seen. But with Donald Trump, it's a bit volatile, his position. Some have seen his actions in Beijing as maybe a softening, a quieter approach to Beijing. But it's really unclear at this stage. As we know, Donald Trump can flip-flop. He can change his position very rapidly.
Yeah, with the situation with China, Taiwan, the United States, as you rightly say, the level of unpredictability is high. And maybe that's one reason why we see so many leaders trying to get in the front door when it comes to Xi Jinping. There is this sense of acceleration. I mean, if we look at the list in 2026 alone, the leaders of the UK, Canada, Ireland, South Korea, Uruguay, Germany, Spain, the United States, and now Russia, they have all paid a visit to Beijing. Why do you think, why are we seeing this rush of leaders visiting Xi Jinping in such a short span of time?
Well, Putin's visit was scheduled. That was on the cards already. So it looks like he just immediately fell on the heels of Donald Trump's visit. But he was scheduled to be there. He's signing the 25th anniversary of Sino-Russian relations, and this was expected. But it's also nice for Putin to get a briefing on what happened between Xi and Trump. So I think that that's a sign of respect as well for Putin. Putin's in a really difficult situation. The Ukrainians have a theory of victory now where they are attacking all of Russia's infrastructure, energy infrastructure. So it's even more important now for the Russians to get this deal with China for energy. But it doesn't, in my feeling on this has been discussed for many, many years. It's actually a problematic way as well. It's very difficult to build this. And even if the deal was signed today, it would take several years to build. So it wouldn't really help Putin immediately. But I think Putin might be trying to signal to the Europeans like, hey, this is, the energy you used to buy from me, and I might be making a deal with China. So I think that he's trying to use whatever cards he has left to play to try to get maybe Europe to pay a little more attention, maybe come up with a better deal. We even saw the front page story today in the Financial Times that either Merkel or Draghi will be a Putin whisperer. So the Europeans are getting a bit desperate. Their energy situation is quite dire, and it would be great if they could turn that spigot back on, especially with more problems and no clear end in sight for the Strait of Hormuz crisis. So I think that Xi looks like everyone is coming to him. 1.4 billion customers can't be wrong. And it's very difficult, as everyone is learning, to decouple or de-risk from China. So China is becoming far more assertive in its approach to other countries. The Europeans might be hurting the most from all of this. It's very difficult for them to ask for things from China. I've been hearing stories about negotiations, and the Chinese are playing hardball with the Europeans.
Mm-hmm. In addition to, 20 agreements that we saw signed between Russia and China today, just in trade and tech, there was also another paper that was signed. This was a declaration on a multipolar world order. I want you to take a listen to what Xi said about that earlier today.
We oppose all unilateral bullying and acts that reverse the course of history, and especially oppose all provocative acts that deny the achievements of the victory in World War II and attempt to rehabilitate fascism and militarism.
So, Teresa, we heard President Xi there not saying anything directly about a new world order, at least the way we understand it. What's interesting, though, is he didn't say anything at all about this emerging world order when President Trump was there last week. Should we read anything into that? I mean, the language with Putin is certainly different than the language with Trump.
Of course, he has to speak to his audience. So I think that it wouldn't have done him any favor to mention that to Donald Trump. I think that the meeting went smoothly. Trump wanted to, as he said, show respect to Xi and to China. He brought some business folks with him. No deals appear, or very few deals were signed. But many analysts have said that they see a whiff of better relations between the U.S. and China. But I think that clearly there are a lot of tensions underneath this kind of polite diplomatic dance. And it's kind of like not a détente, but maybe a mini détente, so that the U.S. and China can actually, the U.S. has a lot on their plate right now, especially with Iran, and Donald Trump went there as asking a favor of Xi not to sell any weapons to Iran. So that never was written down. Trump said he did. China hasn't really said that they would agree to that. So it's very unclear at this point. But Trump wants to have a deliverable and show that he got something out of the meeting besides the Boeing deal with the planes, which was, we hope, will be delivered on. There's one thing saying that you're doing a deal, but actually delivering it remains to be seen. We saw the same thing happen with soybeans in Trump 1.0. The Chinese signed all these agreements, but they never delivered on them. So time will tell.
I want to just ask you, before we move on, about this idea of multipolarity. Is this world that we're living in right now, are we living every day in a more multipolar world, as Xi and Putin would like to suggest? Or is this really a world, and you mentioned this earlier, that is looking more bipolar with every moving day, a world that is ruled by China and the United States? And why isn't Xi willing to say that?
Well, I always think of the Gramsci quote that, we're in an interregnum right now. The old institutions are eroding. They need a reform. People were a bit slow to try to reform them. Plus, we have the shock of a new technology and how that's being absorbed and changing everything. So I think we're really in this kind of messy period, and it's unclear where we're headed. But people feel uncomfortable when I say this. I really do think it's a bipolar world. And that's code language. When you say multipolar, everyone wants to hear multipolar. It means everyone has a say, especially Russia wants to hear the multipolar narrative. So Xi has tailored his comments to his audience. Putin doesn't want to be seen as a weak power. Its economy is smaller than that of Italy, and it's in 5 years of war in Ukraine. Many people think it was a huge disaster. They really are in trouble. He made a disastrous mistake in Ukraine. The Ukrainians are actually improving all the time with their own technology and levels of innovation, and actually getting deeper and deeper into Russia, attacking their energy infrastructure. So their main moneymaker, energy infrastructure, is being attacked. So this, over the long run, is going to hurt them. It's unclear. I don't know how the war will end, but Russia cannot keep it as like a frozen conflict because the Ukrainians are really hell-bent on winning. And so they have a very tough adversary. And so this was a war by choice. The Chinese, in my view, are trying to kind of push back a little from the narrative that China is supporting Russia. Clearly they are. If Russia
Teresa,
didn't have China support, the war would be
Let me ask you this, though. Could we say that as things stand right now, Russia is almost completely dependent on China for survival? I mean, is that going too far?
Well, the Russians, like the Chinese, can really eat a lot of bitter. They've gone through terrible things in the past, and they're really tough people. I lived in Moscow for 5.5 years, and I was there during one of the huge financial crashes. And I remember the taxi driver said to me, "We are like cockroaches. You can step on us, but we keep coming back." They really suffer, and they have this kind of mentality that they're proud of their ability to suffer. So yes, I'm sure there are some oligarchs who are getting angry that they can't travel, that they're not making as much money as they used to in the past. The public, I think, are a bit skeptical about China's growing influence on Russia. But Putin has painted himself into this very difficult corner. China wisely doesn't make him feel that, but China really understands that they've got Russia right where they want them, and that this possible energy deal, the Chinese are always very tough negotiators, and they're not going to be just nice and give a deal to Putin. They're going to really hit him hard on price, who's going to build it, and all of these other issues. So I think that Russia, the Chinese are really wise. They roll out the red carpet for Putin. They make him feel like a VIP. They put him up on the Jumbotron. And let's face it, how many countries can Putin travel to? Very few, because of the International Criminal Courts. So this is one of the few places he can travel to. China always treats him with great respect. but he definitely made an announcement before he even got on the plane that he wanted this deal. So I think he's really under a lot of pressure to get this deal through. And I think that, signing all these other agreements will be nice, deliverables, because it's always a tyranny of deliverables when you have such a high-level meeting and he has to go home with something in his hand and saying, yes, this is a multipolar world, meaning everyone has a say. But we're going to see more hedging. And I think that ultimately, not in this period yet, but countries will have to choose who are we going to expect to help us. We're seeing the U.S. kind of pull back a bit under the Trump administration, at least rhetorically, on support for Europe, and that makes Europe very nervous. So we're really at a tough time, as Gramsci said, a time of monsters. So we really have, the old world is not dead, and the new one has yet to be born. So we're waiting, and China is kind of calmly, Xi Jinping is saying, everyone's coming to me. I am the responsible leader, and I'm not upsetting the whole international order. This guy, Donald Trump, is. That's kind of his message.
Last week, during President Trump's visit, Xi Jinping referred to the Thucydides trap, which is a concept from ancient Greece that describes the inevitable tensions when a rising power threatens to displace an established power. Athens challenged Sparta. Then, today, it's China challenging the U.S. Let me ask you, is he warning Trump, either you accept us or you'll end up fighting us?
Yes, I think that the meeting was 3 very clear red lines that Xi Jinping got across. One was Taiwan. The other was clearly, by even bringing up the Thucydides trap, the author of the book that was published several years ago on this, which I don't really agree with, but anyway, everyone likes to refer to ancient Greece as a template. And I think that the U.S. sees China as a peer competitor. The meeting in Beijing was a lot of nice, happy talk, but the reality is the same. China is a clear competitor of the U.S., especially in that high-tech AI race, and that's where the real competition will be taking place. Because whoever wins that race, at least this is the current thinking on the subject, will be the world's leader. So China's working towards it. The U.S. is working towards it. Other countries are Russia's missing out on this whole competition. Europe, not really competing very much on that. So the competition in the most important area is between China and the U.S. So everyone can think that there is a multipolar world. Everyone has a say. India might have more of a competitor role in AI as well. So that's another. But I would say right now, you could say it's a strategic triangle between Russia, China, and the U.S. At least that's what my impression is from these meetings. But Russia is clearly the shortest part of that triangle. And China will use Russia to actually make its advance, because it's anti-West. So China and Russia are together. They have common goals of anti-Western positions, and so that works to their benefit. And because they share such a long border, and as one Chinese scholar said to me, which I was really taken aback by his frankness, he said, the reason we have to continue to embrace Russia is that we are preparing for a war. So we need Russia in our tent, not outside it. So no matter what happens, I think China likes to see a weaker Russia, because then they can get more things from it, more technology, more access to the Arctic, maybe better energy deals. But it suits China's purpose, this world where the U.S. is expending all their energy and attention and missiles in Iran, focuses on other parts of the world, and China continues to just keep moving forward and looking calm. It's not that Xi has to travel to capitals now. He's turned that on its head and made it seem really beneficial that everyone comes to him.
Yeah, and that certainly is a luxury to have. And we want to kind of end this, not talking so much about war, but maybe talking about roses. I mean, we were struck by the imagery of the photo ops that we've seen with Xi Jinping and his visitors the past few weeks, Teresa. I mean, my producers, they told me that the scene that was set for Xi and Trump could not have been more romantic, a bromance complete with maybe flowers. And it reminded us of a line from one of Gertrude Stein's poems, a rose is a rose is a rose. Simply put, it just means a thing is what it is. So maybe the lesson here, Teresa, one should not read too much into anything. Don't project a rose is a rose, I suppose. Dare we believe our eyes when it comes to Xi Jinping and all of his relationships with the world?
Well, I thought it was very moving that Xi Jinping offered to send these seeds back with Donald Trump from the roses, and that they wax profoundly about the ancient trees, right? So when you're an old leader, maybe you start thinking about your legacy and seeing these old trees and seeing maybe these roses bloom like the cherry blossoms that the Japanese gifted to the US. So I think that when you're older leaders, you might start thinking that way, that what is my legacy? What am I leaving behind? And what will future generations see from this meeting? So maybe the rose bushes, which the rose garden was torn up by Melania Trump, that was originally planted by Jackie Kennedy.
That's
so
right.
Maybe they'll make a little between the paving stones and plant these Chinese rose bushes if they survive the climate in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, maybe they can put them in the new ballroom there that's being built at the White House. Time will tell. Teresa, good to have you with us today. Good to get your insights on everything. Teresa Fallon with the Center for Russia, Europe, Asia Studies in Brussels. Teresa, as always, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. So what do you think? In a world order where everything is being questioned and challenged, is Xi Jinping leading us into something new? Is she the one? Tell us what you think. I'm Brent Goff in Berlin. For all of us, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.